This is Trish Robichaud here at MS Relief. To begin our evening, I would like to give you an introduction to Dr. Larry Burklehammer. And Dr. Larry, he's author of a book called In Your Own Hands, New Hope for People with Chronic Medical Conditions. Dr. Burklehammer has lived and worked with several medical conditions since his childhood. After years of engaging in the practices explained in his book, Dr. Larry has now combined his research and practices into his book to help others with similar conditions and situations. In Your Own Hands, New Hope for People with Chronic Medical Conditions serves as a guide to help those living with chronic illness, as well as their caregivers, learn how to live with conscious intention to maximize health and well-being. And tonight he's going to share with us some of his own experience. Dr. Larry has spent the past 2 years helping others through his blog, and he is available at larryburklehammer.com, as well as contributing to OM Times, Psych Central, and many other blogs online in the chronic illness community. Dr. Larry lives in California with his wife of 37 years. Dr. Larry, thank you so much for joining us and blessing us with your wisdom.
It's great to be part of your organization.
Without further ado, I am going to cut out and give you front and center stage.
Yeah, thank you, Trish, and welcome everyone. So the way this got started is I had been dealing with a number of chronic conditions all my life, and around the year 2000, 1999, 2000, 2001, I finally made my way to a major academic medical center, and when I was there, I saw top world-renowned people who finally diagnosed things that I hadn't previously been diagnosed for. And what happened was I was given a number of diagnoses. For one thing, a severe malabsorption syndrome, which resulted in my inability to absorb calcium, which resulted in my in very, very severe osteoporosis, more severe than the average 95-year-old woman. They have two forms of arthritis. The medications for that interfere with other things. They have a primary bleeding disorder, a primary immunodeficiency disease that's different from AIDS. Most people are familiar with HIV, which is an acquired immunodeficiency. I have a primary immunodeficiency. So in other words, it's most likely genetic. I have a couple of autoimmune diseases, and so when these doctors finally told me that here are your diagnoses, but at the same time they said there are no cures for any of this. So I started wondering, well, if there are no cures and no good treatments even, then what can I do? And so I began to explore the mind and the field of psychology, which is what I was in. And I found that there's a lot of evidence, and this is what I'll be presenting over the weeks, showing that our state of mind can dramatically improve our state of well-being, our level of happiness, and even our level of health. So I had tests performed, a lot of tests, and the value of getting all these tests of all different types is that every treatment is based on getting a correct diagnosis. If you're not correctly diagnosed, you'll get the wrong treatment. So it's essential to get the correct diagnosis to start. This was a favorite TV show I used to watch where they used to investigate mostly infectious disease, but I did my own medical investigation. and found that it's really important to find doctors who are able and willing to think outside the box, because a lot of new doctors are trained to think in terms of algorithms, which are fine for average patients. But if you have anything unusual going on, like, for example, two different conflicting diagnoses, it's important to have a doctor who can think outside the box. This was someone who was able
Dr.
to do
Larry.
that. Gregory House. That was my very favorite TV show while it was on. I had
Dr.
echocardiograms.
Larry,
Yeah,
can you talk a little bit about algorithms? You know, I've heard that word before. I don't really even know what it means. I've only ever heard it in terms of the internet and how these internet marketers can crunch loads of data. So I guess it's got to do with data for doctors too. But what does that?
yeah.
I don't
It's the
understand.
same thing, really. It's just that instead of dealing with computers, you're dealing with humans.
Patients.
But basically, a patient comes in presenting with certain symptoms, and so a brand new doctor would pull out his or her iPhone or uh,
Mm-hmm.
Android or BlackBerry, whatever, and go into their software program that has the algorithms, and they would key in the symptoms. And when they type in those symptoms, several possible diagnoses come up. And then they ask, so those prompt the doctor to ask the patient more questions. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on which answers the patient gives, that guides the doctor in which branch of the algorithm to go down.
That is so cool. I thank you for sharing that. You know, and that honestly, that gives me a lot of insight into where the intuition of the doctor kicks in, because the responses that you get from the patient, that's where you find a path to a diagnosis. Brilliant.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And
Thank you.
so, yeah. So I had tons of tests. I had various different MRI protocols. Um, I had immunology tests, all kinds of specialized tests. Uh, Sweat chloride test, that was because they suspected that I had a variant form of cystic fibrosis because the malabsorption lined up with that. Um, this was the most invasive test I had. Most people think of colonoscopies when they think of invasive, but you can see the size of the syringe here. Uh, this was for a bone marrow biopsy where they um, take something that actually looks a little bit like a carpenter's chisel, and they go deep into your bone and suck out bone marrow to test it. And I've had that done twice. Um, so it's really essential to get tests done at academic medical centers if there's any question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they suspected a mild inflammatory bowel disease secondary to ankylosing spondylitis. Um, this is what happens to people over time with a spondyloarthropathy. This is a man on the left, 1947. Then the next picture is how he looked 10 years later. The next picture, 20 years later. And the next picture, another 5 years after that. So I was diagnosed with very severe osteoporosis. On the left, you see what normal bone looks like, and on the right is osteoporotic bone, where much of the bone has been lost. So that's something I'm living with. I had been taking good care of myself. All my life, I had been eating a nutrient-dense diet. I had avoided junk food and fast food. I had exercised every day. Um, I got enough sleep. I was doing everything right. But the one thing I wasn't doing right is there were things I just didn't know about. And
It was
I
just
found them out through
piece missing to the
research.
puzzle, right?
Yeah, a lot of pieces were missing actually. And they are the pieces that are in my book and that we will be exploring each week. Just
Awesome.
briefly, things like improving, making sure you have enough social support, like you feel like you're part of a community where you feel very accepted and you're welcomed into the community and valued. That's very important. Um,
Hmm.
Self-acceptance is another big one. It's very hard to acquire self-acceptance, but self-acceptance has a lot to do with how healthy you're going to be. So there are many other things like that that we will be going into.
Looking forward to it.
The problems with medications is side effects. And this cartoon shows a doctor reading the side effects that, gee, he didn't realize that a hideous monster wasn't listed as one of the adverse reactions, but a lot of times people feel that the medications they're on have turned them into that. And a lot of patients prefer to just bury their heads in the sand. They don't want to know too many things. They'd rather just go to the doctor, do what the doctor tells them, and other than that, just not really learn anything about their condition, because it just, they don't, they say that it stresses them out. What the research shows is that patients who become empowered patients, patients who learn everything they can about their condition, actually do much, much better than those who bury their heads in the sand. So I'm going to tell you about something that really changed my life. It was an incident that happened one night. My wife and I used to live in San Diego, and one night I was home and I felt all the classic symptoms of the flu coming on. Chills, fever, extreme fatigue with really rapid onset, body aches. And it was January, so I knew what it was. It was the peak of the flu season. And I turned on the TV, and I had been in the martial arts when I was younger. And so I went from feeling really sick to watching on TV a karate tournament. And I used to love to watch karate tournaments. And this was a particularly good one. And I felt myself getting more and more energized. And to the point where I felt really empowered. And I remember telling myself, I refuse to get sick. And I wasn't just saying it. It wasn't just empty words. I got to the point where in watching this tournament, I was so excited and so empowered that I actually got to a point where I believed, I was totally convinced that I was going to knock the flu right out of my body. And I think what happened is because I think I went into a trance. And I thought I really was in the karate tournament and felt extremely powerful, extremely energized. And by 10 p.m. that night, I think that I started watching at 8 p.m. By 10 p.m., all my symptoms were gone. I was completely better. This hasn't happened since. I haven't been able to duplicate it, but it did convince me of the power of the mind. For the first time in my life, I realized that things like voodoo and faith healing, these things actually work. They only work if you believe in them. But if you believe in them, they work. And that's the power of the mind. Unfortunately, I soon became very, very confused and frustrated because I could not for the life of me, replicate what happened that night. And I think the reason is because when I, after that, would get sick, I would be trying really hard to bring back what I had that night in 1991. And trying interfered with doing. You have to actually believe. You have to be a total believer that you can do it. Trying it just doesn't work. So I did a lot of research. I felt often like this, like I was just climbing mounds of research. Mostly the fields of psychophysiology, which is the field of learning how to self-regulate your own physiological functions using your mind. Psycho-oncology and psychoneuroimmunology are the fields of the connection between the brain, the mind, the nervous system, the immune system.
Fascinating.
So I really liked this quote because most people go through life really not appreciating that we have more at our disposal than just drugs and surgery. We have more at our disposal than diet, exercise, stress management, sleep management. What we have is the power of the mind, and we can learn to access the power of the mind. And that's what I'm going to be talking about over the weeks, every week. This is one of my mentors, and I really love this statement by her. It's just mind-boggling that you cannot have a thought or a feeling without changes, actual biochemical, electrical changes going on in literally every cell in your body. This is someone else saying a very similar thing. This was another mentor. And I heard him say this one day, and I wrote it down. So we're going to be delving in from week to week in how to do this, how to change your mind. And I'm here to tell you that emotions and cognition are physiological. They are biochemical. They actually change cell function. It changes stress hormones. And everything I'm telling you is backed up by studies performed in peer-reviewed, refereed journals, medical journals, and so it's available on these slides. I've always found it helpful to investigate people who are inspirational. I think they motivate all of us to do more, to work harder at developing healthy states of mind. This is a guy, I don't know if you can tell in the picture, he lost his legs, and he has an older guy. He's got two prostheses, and yet he's exercising. It didn't stop him from exercising. You know, we all have limited time on the planet, and it's important to recognize that and to think about how we want to spend whatever time we have remaining. I liked this quote by Napoleon Hill. And this Chinese character for crisis has in it the character for opportunity. There's a quote by John Kabat-Zinn. Essentially what he means here is that terrible things happen to us throughout life, and we have absolutely no control over what things are going to happen to us. But what we do have control over is how to deal with those things that happen to us. It's important to accept our illness. We don't want to, that acceptance doesn't mean a nihilistic acceptance where we become passive. It means accepting the diagnosis, but not the prognosis.
Hmm. I like to say that, if you don't mind, Dr. Larry, I like to say that my acceptance of the illness is learning to honor and accommodate it. Like seriously looking at the realities and making plans in my life accordingly, and putting the supports in place that I need to honor and accommodate it.
It's very important to do that because what you're doing as you learn to accommodate it is you're creating well-being, you're creating peace of
Mm-hmm.
mind. And as you create more
Mm-hmm.
peace of mind, you will improve, you'll reduce your emotional distress. And as you reduce your emotional distress, you then reduce your physiologic stress. In other
Mm-hmm.
words, by reducing physiologic stress, what I mean is you're reducing your stress hormone levels. And when you do that, inflammation, for example, has more of a chance to resolve. And infections
Fascinating.
have more of a chance to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to tell you about this doctor in Europe. This was early in the 20th century. It might have been in the 1920s and 30s. I'm not exactly sure. Patients came to him from all over Europe who had intractable warts all over their body. And he did something that doctors wouldn't be allowed to do today. But he created a machine that made a lot of weird sounding noises, sent out a very strange beam of light, and these people who would come to him terribly inflicted with warts and other diseases, they would go in front of this machine, and he told them this is a very advanced technological treatment. And they would see the weird lights and hear the sounds, and they really believed that this machine had curative effects. And it had no curative effects. It was just light from light bulbs, sounds from sound making machinery, and it had absolutely no therapeutic value. And yet, these people who came to him and submitted to sit in front of the machine, almost all of them got better. Now, this is obviously what happened. It was their minds. The machine didn't make them well. It was the patient's minds who made them well. They got better because they were convinced the machine was going to make them better. But it was their total belief in the machine that actually cured them. And we can learn to do this today without these fake things. We can do this. We can learn to do this. And I will be guiding you, instructing you on this a little bit each week. Drug companies are required by law to list all the side effects on the package of the medication. And although it makes sense that they're required to do that, we all have a right to see what the side effects are. The problem is that has a negative effect on us. Here's a guy, he hasn't read the side effects yet. He looks pretty good. And this is what happens to a lot of us after reading the side effects.
Mm-hmm.
You can see his eyes on the left. He's gone into a trance. And that's kind of what we do. We look at the side effects and we start thinking. And then we start imagining that we're already having the side effects. Well, remember what I told you about that night when I was watching the karate tournament and I convinced myself that I was going to beat the flu, and I did. Well, the reverse works too, unfortunately. You can convince yourself that you're having certain side effects, and guess what? You will have them. These are some of the side effects that have been documented by physicians. But what's interesting here is These are the side effects that have been documented. These are the side effects that are listed on the label, but these are the side effects, what you see on the screen, these are the side effects that people have suffered with after being given a placebo. They were given a placebo, but they were made to believe that it was the real drug. And they were told what the side effects were. But they weren't given the drug. They were given a sugar pill, a harmless sugar pill, and yet they suffered with every one of these things on this list.
Hmm.
Now I'd like to tell you about what I found out in the studies. What I had done is the literature review. I reviewed hundreds of studies that all looked at the connection between the brain, the mind, the immune system, and the rest of the body. And these researchers looked at behavior, and they looked at attributes, personality characteristics. And so this slide is a slide I'll be showing you every week. It's so important because these are the attributes that the healthiest people had. The people who seem to be the happiest and the healthiest people had these attributes. So we'll be going over these every week. And in fact, I will be giving you pointers on how you can develop these characteristics. I've been working on these myself. In fact, this is what was missing from my life. Earlier I had told you I had been eating a perfect diet, exercising, sleeping right, seemingly doing everything right. But what was missing from my life was I wasn't practicing most of the things on this list. And now I am, or at least I'm trying to, but it's not easy. We're practicing something all the time. So this is a picture of a rock climber scaling a vertical rock. Now, the more he does this, the better he's going to get at it. Well, the more we practice the things on this list, the better we get at them. So it's important to ask yourself every day, what are you practicing? So I'd like to guide you now through some mental imagery that will begin to give you a sense of what you can do to actually change your physiology.
Dr. Larry, how should we decide which pharmaceuticals if we don't read the side effects? I have a question here from one of our attendees today. If we don't read the side effects, how do we decide which pharmaceuticals?
Which drug to use?
Yeah, I think that's what the person is indicating. Yeah.
You know, I defer to my doctors on that. I trust
Yeah.
I trust my doctors. I work with, and here's the thing, it's important to find doctors you trust. And if you don't have complete faith in your doctors, in your primary care doctor, and however many, I see a lot of specialists, and I have faith in all of them. And if you don't have that real deep faith in the ability of your doctors, then it's time to find another doctor. Because I'm not a physician. And, you know, my field is psychology, not medicine. So it's true, I mean, I've studied physiology, I know about biochemistry, but I'm not a physician. So I rely on my doctors for that. But what I do is when I take a medication, I do read the side effects. Probably I shouldn't, but I do read them. But I'm careful to not let myself get hung up on the side effects. And I use mental imagery to convince myself that I'm not going to get those side effects.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. One of our attendees had commented, but suppose the doctor overlooked something and you might notice something important listed, such as an effect on maybe your blood sugar, your blood pressure, or something that's, for example, cardio.
Well, even the best doctors make mistakes. You can go to
Hmm.
the top medical centers in the country, in the world, and see the top doctors, and those doctors are not perfect. They make mistakes. They're human, and they overlook things. And it's important, if you think of anything, to bring that up with your doctor. A lot of patients make that mistake. They take herbs and they take all kinds of alternative treatments, and they forget to tell their doctors, or they're afraid to tell their doctors. It's
Hmm.
important to tell your doctor everything, and if you find out about a medical treatment that your doctor hasn't recommended, it's important to ask your doctor about that treatment. It could be that it was just an oversight on your doctor's part.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you.
This particular slide will come up every week, and when it comes up each week, I will teach you a different um, mental imagery exercise that will help you actually change your physiology.
Cool.
Okay, here's the one that comes to mind. This is kind of a fun one that I have done on occasion. Think of an individual who you really admire. Think of someone, now this person could be real, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a stranger, it could be a fictional character, someone you see in the movies or TV. Um, think of someone who acts the way you would like to act. Think of someone who seems to have the attitude that you would like to live by. Someone who just seems to live life the way you wish you could live your life. And I'd like you to get a really good image of that person. If it helps, close your eyes. Um, and just really see that person. See that person in all their glory, living their life in a way you so admire, and in a way you so wish was you. And really now pretend you are that person. Become that person. I'd like you to actually become that in your mind. Become that person. You are no longer you. You are this other person. And let yourself really experience, what is that like? What does that feel like? Notice if you see the world differently. Notice if you feel different in your body. Notice if, as this person, you're actually happier. I'll tell you a brief story from my life. Um, at one time, before I went back to school and became a psychotherapist, I had been in the business world, and I sold my business, and we were going to be moving from New England, from the Boston area to San Diego, and my business sold right away, and my wife was in social work school and had another year to finish. And so I spent my time going to acting school while waiting for her before moving. And I had this terrible fear that I liked it so much that if I were to, I had this fear that if I were to become an actor, I would enjoy so much being these other characters, because I didn't like myself. I liked other people more than I liked myself. I had a total lack of self-acceptance. And So I got scared. I thought, well, I could really lose myself in these other characters, and that scared me to such an extent. I decided to go back into business, and I did that for a while when we moved and eventually after 3 years of that, I finally went back to school and changed careers because I realized my real interest was in psychology. Um,
But
but I think
perhaps your little sojourn into acting served a really fundamental purpose in your career path.
it did because what I discovered is when I was acting, when I was someone else, this other character, and became that character, I felt empowered. I felt more in charge of my life than I had ever felt before. I felt healthier, happier, and
Hmm.
uh, it was an amazing learning experience. So
Thank you for sharing that with us.
I'm curious how this experience was for people. Anyone has anything
Yeah,
they want
would
to say?
love some feedback. I know I typed in the message window that honestly, Dr. Larry, I think that you could do guided meditation audios because while you were talking us through this visualization, your voice is very conducive to helping me go to that meditative state. Thank you. And Lynette is typing, and yeah, Linda said totally relaxing. Was very relaxing. Yeah, fabulous. Never imagined that we'd do a group guided meditation. Yeah, Hope says, me too. Lynette says, I loved it. I was smiling and felt energetic. There you
Well,
go.
that's great. I'm so
Mhm.
happy to hear
Thank
that
you very
everyone.
much, ladies, for the feedback. Thank you for the feedback, ladies.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you had a positive result. So each week when this slide comes up, I'll guide you through something a different type. This was just
Oh,
this week. So one of the things we want to do, moving on now, is, and this is something, this slide will also be coming up each week because I'll be guiding you through this. But this week, is just a very basic introduction. But essentially what we want to do is correlate how we feel, our emotions, with physical sensations. So that when you feel a certain sensation in your body, that will guide you into knowing more about your emotional state so that you can work with it better. So we'll address this more in the future.
mm,
Essentially, this is what I was saying. So if you notice a strong emotion, so it works both ways. So this previous slide, if you notice a certain physical sensation, it's good to see if you can use that to guide you into what you're feeling. And the reverse is also true. If you're having a strong emotion, you want to notice what thoughts are there because usually whenever we have a very strong emotion, that strong emotion was preceded by a thought.
mm,
If we are having a lot of anger or rage, chances are the thought that led to that was a thought that a certain person is wrong or did a bad thing or a certain situation was wrong. Uh, if we're having a strong feeling of frustration, angst, anxiety, then it could be the thought that preceded it was one such as, I can't do this, I'll never succeed. So the thoughts we have create the feelings we have, and the feelings we have then affect our health.
mm-hmm.
So it's really important to observe our thoughts. And this is another slide that's going to come up every week because we will be working with this each week. Um, we tend to think that our beliefs are just what they are. They're our beliefs, and we're enmeshed with our beliefs, and there's nothing we can do about them. So throughout, from week to week, I will be exploring with you how we can get to see that our thoughts are nothing more than products of the mind. So another thing we're going to be exploring is mindfulness. And, you know, a lot of people have tried all different types of meditation. And over the years, I've had so many people tell me, oh, I can't meditate. Because when I try to meditate, my mind just wanders. And
Mm-hmm.
I always,
And they
it
give
always
up.
strikes me. Yeah, they
That's
give
where they
up.
give up.
And, yes, but guess what? My mind wanders. I've been meditating since the early 1970s. My mind wanders all over the place. That's just the nature of the mind. So the trick is, when the mind wanders, to just simply, gently, with total acceptance, bring your attention back. That's all. So we'll be exploring this each week.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see this. I'm going to skip over this for now. One thing I want to do is very important for health and improving state of mind, has to do with breathing. One of the many things I had not been doing correctly throughout most of my life was I wasn't breathing correctly. And I ran into an acquaintance a few years ago who told me that she had just had a cardiac defibrillator implanted and a pacemaker implanted in her chest. And she told me that she believed that the reason she needed these was because she discovered, unfortunately, after too much time had gone by, that whenever she would be feeling stressed, she would hold her breath. You know, I think we all do that. If we feel a sense of sudden fear, terror, we hold our breath.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine crossing the street and all of a sudden a car comes out of nowhere and we gasp. It's like, and we hold our breath. Well, if we do that occasionally, it's not a problem. But I was holding my breath a lot. I was breathing shallowly. So each week we'll be going into this more. The idea, though, is to learn how to relax the diaphragm and breathe diaphragmatically so that on the left you can see that as you inhale, the lower abdomen expands, and on exhalation, the lower abdomen contracts. So we'll be going into that more. That is the single fastest way to calm yourself whenever you're feeling anxious, fearful, just out of sorts. This is the single fastest way to calm yourself and to feel better. So we'll definitely be going into this each week. Just very briefly go into it now and tell you about gas exchange and acid base. Every time I go into this, I always have this fear like, oh, people are going to start zoning out. They don't want to hear about it. But I'll just go through it really fast. If you're breathing properly, diaphragmatic breathing at a healthy rhythm, that improves your pH. Let's say you're breathing very shallowly and rapidly, what happens is you're blowing off too much carbon dioxide and your pH is actually going to go up too much.
And which is acidic? pH is down or up?
So if you're breathing really rapidly, you're blowing off too much carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide has to do with carbonic acid. It's an acid. So if we blow off too much carbon dioxide, we become too alkaline. The pH goes up too high. So in diaphragmatic breathing, the gas exchange takes place in all of the lung, the whole lung, which is much healthier. So you're getting more complete gas exchange. And by gas exchange, it's not just carbon dioxide, but oxygen, nitrogen, and a whole bunch of, we tend to think, oh, that it's just oxygen that matters. Well, actually, no, we actually are breathing in much more nitrogen than oxygen.
Mm.
So we want to have a good exchange, a gas exchange that takes place in the lungs. The lungs are where the blood circulates through the lungs, and the gas is infused into and out of the capillaries. So in very shallow chest breathing, which is the opposite of rapid hyperventilation, in hypoventilation, too much carbon dioxide is retained in the lungs. And that lowers the pH. So this creates a situation of acidosis. Now the body is remarkable, and it has compensatory mechanisms. There's something called metabolic compensation, where the kidneys then secrete bicarb to buffer the acid. But the ideal is to breathe in a healthy way, so as not to put such a strain on the kidneys.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Larry, before you
Yeah.
move on, just giving you a 5-minute warning. Then we're going
Okay.
to the top
Thank
of
you
the
for that.
hour.
Yeah, I
And
lost
I
track of
just,
time.
that's okay.
Yeah. Um, so one of the things we want to do, this is similar to what I said before about bringing the mind back to where you are, not just when you're meditating, but all the time. Imagine the Blue Angels, the Navy flight demonstration team. Uh, they're flying their planes at supersonic speeds at just 36 inches apart, which I always find hard to believe, but it's true. Um, their minds don't wander. When they're done and they're back on the ground, their minds wander just like everyone else. But when they're doing this performance, their minds can't wander because it would be a disaster.
No kidding.
So we're going to be dealing a lot with what's called attentional training each week.
Mm.
Another thing, I'll just skip through this because we're short of time, but well, I'll be going into this more next week. And this also. I'm going to be guiding you through a body scan, 2 different types of body scans, actually several subtypes of each type of body scan, which will provide you with a lot of information about your state of mind and your state of physiology. I go in great detail to all of this in my book, and in the book I just go through countless things you can practice. But we will be covering these each week. So I don't know if there are any other questions, if we have time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had us wrap 5 minutes early so that we would have time because there's been a lot of engagement within the chat window, and I saw a couple of the ladies who are with us have actually sent messages to me one-on-one through Skype as well, already talking about looking forward to. So Lynette is the first one to start typing, so I'm sure she's got a question coming. She said she's very looking forward to all of these techniques.
I don't have a question, but I understand a comment where I am allergic to the sun, and if I have no sunblock on, and minutes within being in the sun, I will break out on a rash, and I'll scratch and stuff. And I, a couple of years ago, got into a relationship, and I was very, very happy. I was ecstatic, and I was really freaked out that while I was in this relationship and really happy, I was no longer allergic to the sun. It was summertime. I could lay out in the sun without sunblock, and I've been experiencing being allergic to the sun since my early 20s. I'm now 50, but for those few short months that I was really ecstatic in that relationship and so happy with just being me, I wasn't allergic to the sun. The relationship ended, and I was back to being allergic to the sun again.
This is Lynette. I was so happy to hear that because you actually had the same type of experience that I had that night when I was watching the karate tournament, where I changed my physiology. The fact is, when we are really happy, the way you were during that time period, um, our physiology improves, and we can actually improve our health. Uh, the challenge is, how do we do this? How can we accomplish this? And I wish I had some easy answer on how to do this, and I don't. If I did, I would probably just be euphoric all the time, and I wouldn't have any doctors I'd need to see. But what I have found is
Absolutely.
what I have found is that these various practices that I'm going to be introducing you to each week do help. Uh, they're, they're not a cure, but they do help. And so that's why I'm excited to offer this information to you.
Fabulous. Just amazing. I think that yeah, it is all very interesting. The comments that we're getting on the chat are just so positive, Dr. Larry. From my own perspective, I just want to say that I feel like I finally have someone who is of, uh, you know, educated background, a doctor of psychology, is actually saying things out loud that I kind of knew in my heart for a long time. But listening to your presentation, you're actually putting the science behind what I kind of always knew that I had the ability to influence the course of my illness and my health from day to day. It's so exciting to me that you're putting science behind that.
Well,
That's
thank
so
you.
cool.
Yeah, there's a certain way I've been interested in this for many, many decades. And I remember, especially back in the 70s, people who were also interested used to say things to me about, oh, you should try such and such, either a product or some practice. And I would, that was long before the internet, and I'd go to the library and I would look at the research, and there was no research. And my thing is, I like to see evidence. So everything I've written about in my book, and everything we're going to be exploring each week is based on science and, evidence-based practices.
Fabulous. That is an amazing segue to a wrap up, Dr. Larry. Your content has been wonderful. It has in many ways has been kind of earth shattering for me to say, wow, this is real. Let's do this. And I'm so excited. Linda and I know I can say for her that we are very excited about you bringing this content and this knowledge and these techniques and this learning to MS Relief, and we're thrilled. And Hope is saying yes, thank you, and Peyton says yes too, and Lynette says amazing and exciting. And we are thrilled that you have joined MS Relief as an associate partner here. We're just thrilled to have you. Our topic title for next week is going to be toward mastery and well-being. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate you stopping by to have a listen to our guest speaker, Dr. Larry Burklehammer, and I hope you all join us next week for webinar number 2 in the journey. And by the way, if you know people that would benefit attending, please, the fact that they weren't here at number 1 isn't going to matter. Dr. Larry's going to be working this series so that each and every one can be benefited from independently, correct?
That's true, yes. They all stand on their own.
Absolutely.
So it can be a drop.
Awesome, awesome.
People can just drop in.
Good night, all.